Anyway, we got Texas Republican Congressman Mike McCaul. He's the Homeland Security Committee Chairman. Always a great honor to have you, Chairman.
Thank you, Neil.
You know, we were talking before, sir, about this under Trump vote, this not expressed Trump vote, and yet in this complicated day of very elaborate polls, I'm told by our own polling people, we had factored that in. And when I ask them, well, how can you factor that in, they just pat me on the head and say, we have factored that in. Now, who am I to judge? But do you guys look at that? I mean, obviously, Mitt Romney 4 years ago was counting on that, an underrepresentation in the polls, and it turned out that it was the president who was underrepresented in the polls. So what do you think? What's your gut?
Well, you know, my gut, I've talked to the pollsters. They have their opinions. They tell me they factor that in as well. It's going to be a very close, tight election, no question about that. The difference is, I think, the status quo versus non-status quo. And a movement that Donald Trump has tapped into, that I think a movement that will show up as diehard loyalists at the polls. That's really the unknown factor here, the X factor, if you will, that could turn this election around. And we know that, as your previous guest said, that the trend line has certainly been going, I think, in Trump's favor. A very good timing, a week out, going right into Election Day today. So I guess it's going to be very close. But I think, you know, when you got key battleground states that would normally go to Democrats now at play,
right,
blue-collar Reagan Democrats that he's tapped into, it's more of a populist thing that he's tapped into versus the conservative establishment thing.
You know, we'll never know. Of course, we know tonight, Congressman, but play out the Republican Party tomorrow. I mean, obviously you win, all's good. But if you lose, the recrimination begins almost immediately. But if it's a close loss, it's a hard one, right, to take if Donald Trump loses by just a little bit. Because then he could argue, mainstream Republicans could argue. There'd be a lot of arguing. What do you envision?
Well, if it's a close race and he loses, I think people will look back and judge Republicans who sat on the sidelines and did nothing to impact the effect or impact of this election.
Would that include Speaker Ryan, who was dragged kicking and screaming?
I think the Speaker's been very clear for his support for Donald Trump, and he
not really.
voted for him.
He's a good man. I take nothing away from him, but I mean, he has not exactly been a cheerleader. He said he voted for Trump, a good Republican, but it didn't sound like he loved doing it.
We need somebody to unify the Republican Party. If Trump wins the White House, Paul Ryan and myself will be working with him to advance a better way agenda. I think
Are you interested in that job? A lot of people said they could coalesce around a guy like you because they're not so sure Ryan will be that up to the task or wanted for the task.
Well, I think Paul is a great guy, and I think he's the obvious. He's going to continue as Speaker. I don't.
Well, that's assuming he has the votes. Do you think that there are many in the Freedom Caucus and elsewhere who say, no, we don't like him. He's not our cup of tea. We don't like the way he treated Donald Trump.
I think there are divisions, and I'll just be honest with you. And I think, it's going to take somebody to unify the party. And I'm talking about the Speaker's race. I think Paul Ryan will be the next Speaker. But I'm talking about the party moving forward. I think this has been a very divisive Republican primary, a very divisive election. I can't remember a time in my lifetime where everyone has not solidified behind the nominee. So you have it's fractured. And I think it's going to take somebody, and certainly if Trump wins, we're going to have to work with him to advance the Better Way agenda. If he loses, we're going to have to unify as a party. Some leaders are going to have to come out of the ashes to bring together the populists and the establishment and the conservative factions within our own party. That's very clear to me.
All right. Chairman, thank you for taking the time. I very much appreciate it.
And thank you, Neil.